Some people actually fight for their illness. They don't want to let it go. So I automatically know that in their conscious or unconscious mind, they're getting more benefits out of running the story or having that label. So if someone's to run that story, maybe their unconscious motive is to stay mad at someone. Maybe it's to stay mad at the world. Maybe they're getting attention. Maybe they're getting sympathy. They're getting some sort of benefit. Otherwise, they won't be holding on to it.
What do you mean when you say you can't give herpes to someone? What is up, you beautiful human? Hello and welcome back to the Raw, Real and Vulnerable podcast with me, your host, Beck Antonucci. I know that so many of you ask me so many questions when it comes to the herpes virus, and I'm going to be completely transparent with you. If I didn't know that I have herpes, I wouldn't know that I have herpes. I have such a high value for my health. I have such a high value for my mind. I have such a high value for the water that I drink, the lifestyle that I live, the food that I eat, the pleasure that I experience, the people that I spend time with, that my quality of life, my quality of living, and the quality of my nutrition is just so incredibly high. I have a standard and I know that I get to live from that standard, and I live committed to that standard. And the reason that I live committed to that standard is because I thrive when I live committed to that standard. And the reason that I don't divert from that standard is because I know how bad it feels when I don't live committed to my standards, when I don't live committed to my values. When I experienced severe disordered eating for so many years, I knew what it felt like to eat food. Like I would consume a stupid amount of food in an attempt to avoid my shame and to avoid my pain and to experience some amount of pleasure. I really have a belief that when women aren't living a pleasure-led life, we will reach for low-hanging fruit when it comes to pleasure. And low-hanging fruit might be chocolate. Low-hanging fruit might be sex with unaligned men. Low-hanging fruit might be wine. Now, I love chocolate. I also enjoy red wine. I don't have sex with unaligned men, but that's temporary pleasure, which will never satiate you, that you can quickly grab when life isn't full of pleasure. I believe when our pleasure cup is so full up, the chocolate tastes good, but you can actually have the whole bar in the fridge and only eat a square because you don't need the whole block. The reason you don't need the whole block, my beliefs, is because pleasure exists elsewhere beyond the block of chocolate. With that said, today's episode with an incredible guest, Mitch Vickridge, we actually deep dive into the values that you live from and how a human is actually only ever loyal to their own personal values. This is going to be an incredibly controversial and taboo episode. Mitch shares a lot about virology online, and I have been reading and consuming a lot of his posts for a long time, where he ends up in very deep and lengthy debates with people about his beliefs around virology, around viruses, around the herpes virus. And I just knew that I had to get Mitch on to pick his brain. This is an episode different to any guests I've ever had on, any episode I've ever released, and I love that. Mitch actually shares, and this may be triggering for some of you to hear, so I'm going to say trigger alert. Mitch shares that we can't actually give someone herpes, and he explains why. This episode is going to be really mind-opening, and I'm not saying that you actually have to agree with anything that gets shared on this podcast. I actually never tell you to agree with anything that gets shared in and on my podcast. In fact, when women join my groups, my mentorships, I always say, I'm sharing my truth and you get to discover your own. So I would love for you to listen today with an open and very curious mind. If you're a note taker, I'd love for you to get out a pen and a piece of paper and start taking down the mic drop moments and the nuggets that you're receiving that you desire to explore more within yourself. And this is the kind of episode that you may even want to double down on and listen to twice. If you love this episode, please screenshot it, share it to your story, tag both myself and Mitch, because we would love to share it and we would love to connect with you. Don't forget, if you prefer to watch your podcast episodes rather than listen, we're now on YouTube. Strap yourself in. This is one hell of an eye-opening episode. Let's fucking go. I'm sitting here in person with a longtime friend, first time sitting here in front of a podcast together, Mitch Vickridge. Welcome to Raw, Real and Vulnerable.
Howdy.
Hello.
Great to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. For anyone who doesn't know who Mitch Vickridge is, who is Mitch Vickridge and what is it that you do in the world?
I would describe myself as a holistic coach and breakthrough facilitator.
Yeah.
And I'm really dedicated here to help people maximize their health, their healing and fulfillment, or their self-mastery of life. And that naturally, as I'm sure we'll go into, has kind of stemmed from my journey and my path to be here on this table today, and everything that just kind of encompasses that. So I'm big on the health, healing, and kind of personal development, self-mastery of life.
Yeah. What does it mean to self-master life?
There is no attainment of self-mastery. It's an ongoing process, an ongoing journey of, I guess, deepening your intimacy or cultivating intimacy and skill with life, feeling like you're empowered in life and that you kind of are the captain of your ship. And even though we're going to be perturbed by the outside world, it's not really what happens on the outside. It's how we master and navigate from the inside. So mastery to me is taking anything that happens on the outside and using it to your greatest advantage and empowering all areas of life so you feel like you're the captain of your ship.
Yeah. And so have you always been this incredibly self-mastered man?
No, I was born retarded. Born like a giraffe that comes out and just kind of hobbling all over and, getting it quote unquote wrong, if you want to use those words, 1,000 times before you kind of, get the hang of things. But definitely not, because, my journey was really about, and we'll go into it I'm sure soon, but really about having such a thirst or curiosity for life. I think that's where it started. I would just ask questions non-stop. I wanted and I needed this insatiable thirst to discover what the universe was and how it worked, how this thing called life works. Why are we these organic meat suit bodies on this organic spaceship floating through what we can call a cosmic soup of the universe? What does it all mean? Why are we here? What are we here to do? And I think it was that thirst that initiated it, because I remember that quite young as a child. It was just this insatiable hunger to learn and to understand.
And so where did that journey lead you? I know I've seen before and after photos of you looking from what looks like peak fitness condition to a condition I don't even understand, but it looks like a wafer of you. What was that? What was that journey?
Well, we've got a podcast that's got a time limit. I'm sure we could boil the kettle. We'd be here till midnight.
Elevator speech of your journey, please.
Elevator speech. Well, it started with me. We'll kind of go down, I'm sure, a pathway that pertains to trauma and how we can sometimes have adaptive behaviors from wounds and things of this nature, because that is one part of the story. But I loved bodybuilding. I grew up with seeing the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the, Rocky Balboa and Stallone and all those guys and He-Man. So that was very inspiring as a kid. I think when you're a young kid, you're very impressionable, and I wanted to be like those guys. It also did stem from a wound of wanting to be strong enough and big enough and all these compensations. But the bodybuilding world by no means is healthy when you get to competitive level, and especially when you have anabolic steroid use and drug use and all those kinds of things. You're pushing your body to the extreme, and you can only do so many burnouts before you rip the tread off a tire, right? And so I was just, burning the candle from all ends. And eventually my body was deteriorating. And, back then, being young, dumb and stupid, of course, that still didn't get in the way. It was like I would, and we'll get into this, I would shit blood and still then take 2 scoops of pre-workout and go ridiculously train with, getting blood noses or vomiting into a bucket. I was just pushing myself to an extreme level. Granted, I attained the physique, but it's at what cost? And, that, again, we're opening up a small conversation, one of many, but that's kind of started the whole journey of deteriorating my health and going from peak condition and having this incredible physique. And I did quite well as a kind of an amateur, and I was kind of on the path to going into professional bodybuilding. But then I ended up as skin and bone. After I competed in the Arnold Classic, I think it was 2015. Within 6 months, I was seconds away from dying on an emergency table, having my entire large intestine cut out. So things rapidly declined quite quickly.
Your entire large intestine you had cut out?
Entire large intestine. Anyone that knows their anatomy knows that with the small intestine ends, you have what's called the ileocecal valve. And then you have about 1.5 meters of large intestine. The end of your descending colon turns into what's called the sigmoid colon, which is the small portion of intestine before the rectum and anal cavity. Everything up into about a little bit of my sigmoid colon from that ileocecal valve, so basically the whole large intestine is out.
How do you live without a large intestine?
So I had a colostomy bag for a year, and that was to let the remaining part of what was left from my anal cavity and rectum and part of my sigmoid colon to rest and recover. And they did what's called an anastomosis reversal, where they took the end of the small intestine and then joined it onto what was left. So they've bypassed the route that my normal 1.5 minutes of large intestine would take. And so that's now kind of short-tracked. So yes, it's amazing what medical technology and surgeries can do to keep people alive and do their things. I'm very grateful.
Wow, what did you do with this huge life experience? So you spend a year with what did you say it was called? A colostomy bag.
Bag. Yeah.
What was that like? Obviously, no dating.
Well, no, I was with my partner at the time.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, she was very, very unconditional and loving, and that was, such a medicinal experience because, the paradox there was actually, and I was saying this to someone the other day, is that I remember the first photo I took was like a selfie in front of the mirror in my bathroom when I got home from the hospital. I had like a 2-week stay, and I'm like skin and bone, and just 6 months prior, I was 112, 113 kilos. Yes. And now I'm this, 55, 56 kilo, skin and bone skeleton. Yeah. And I remember I just had this like gentle smile on my face, and I realized that I actually loved myself more unconditionally in that moment than I had when I had the perfect physique, which was a wild paradox, And so there was medicine in that, and there was also medicine in the amount of love and care and support from both my partner at the time and also the people that surrounded me that loved me for me. And it was this real breaking part of this journey also too. I mean, there's many facets. Mm-hmm. Was breaking the idea of perfectionism and the perfect body and the perfect look and the perfect this and the perfect that, to be loved and appreciated and be validated from the outside. And it was really the starting journey of validating myself from the inside, parts and pieces for sure. And also knowing that I'm not my body. That's not who I inherently am. It's the vehicle that I'm using on this life for 80-something years. Bless, hope I made that long. I'd love to do over 100. But that was such a profound turning point, and also what really catalyzed the awakening journey of getting into the healing arts, detoxification, regeneration, trauma work, and really understanding and understanding what was going inside of my psyche and my body. Because I had no idea. And I subscribed and kind of subordinated to the medical model of you have a disease. I wore the label loud and proud. I was a Crohn's warrior or a colitis warrior. And I really was disempowered in that area. And this kind of dovetails back into what I do now, which is empowering all areas of your life. Because if you don't empower yourself physically, you'll be told what drugs to take and what organs to cut out. But there's no part of your body that has a shortage of prednisone or antidepressants or any kind of drug. They're brilliant when they're needed, no doubt, but not to fully empower your life and that area of your life. So I was very disempowered. I kind of gave my power away to authorities and doctors, and that gave me the excuse to not take responsibility. I probably had the emotional spectrum of butter at that point in time of my life. So again, awakening to emotions and psychology and neurology and physiology and all these ologies and studies, and that really birthed a large part of my journey into the field that I'm in today.
Did you experience any resentment or anger towards the medical field?
Yeah, definitely. I think naturally, because I remember even going in when I was at Fremantle Hospital when I first had what's called a quote unquote flare. I was I don't know what the audience is like here, but I was, excuse my French, shitting blood.
Yeah.
34
We can say anything on this podcast.
Nice and free, beautiful, real raw and vulnerable. Yeah, I guess.
And Becca Antonucci style.
Becca Antonucci style. Fucking oath. Okay, cool. Thanks for the permission slip, Beck. So yeah, I was, shitting blood 30, 40 times a day. There was a massive first initial flare. And then that kind of calmed down because I was, drugged up with prednisone and anti-inflammatories and steroids. And so my first hospital visit with the specialist, the quote-unquote specialist, who again, bless his soul, was just trained in medical training, but really didn't understand what I know today. I said to him, I will call him, Dr. Smith. I said, Dr. Smith, this is like a gastrointestinal disease, like of my digestive system. Are you telling me? Because I'd heard your diet and all these other factors don't influence the disease nature. And I said, are you sure that none of my lifestyle and none of my nutrition affect anything that I'm experiencing? And I remember he point blank looked at me and I said, nope, we don't know what causes it. There's no cure. Here are your drugs. We'll see you in 3 months. It was just like a point blank delivery. Yes. And I remember sliding the door and looking at like 30 or 40 people in the waiting room. And I just knew at that moment they were about to receive the exact same news. And I was like, how in God's name can you box all human beings with such individuated lifestyles and circumstances and emotions and thoughts and feelings and everything into the same category? And that kind of it really spawned the journey of awakening and taking more self-responsibility and accountability and study. But there was definitely a period where I was like, well, fuck you. Why tell me that? But then to, gain a broader perspective, deeper wisdom to realize that's not their fault. They're just repeating what they're being taught to train, or what they're being taught to say based on their training, I should say. Yeah. And so a lot of it was dissolved in that way of realizing and understanding like a deeper depth of like, okay, they're just doing their job and it's my responsibility. So once I took radical ownership and responsibility, that definitely dissolved a lot of the anger and resentment and just gave me way more permission to just take this accountability on for myself, empower my own life. It's not their responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. I know a part of the reason that I wanted to have you on is to speak about your knowledge around viruses. I know that that a large part of my community connect with me around the herpes virus. And a big theme for them is resentment towards the medical field, being told incorrect information, being told that lifestyle and diet doesn't impact the virus at all or their symptoms, being given a antiviral and just being told come back for your next script, being provided no psychological support, not saying that emotions impact, their stress doesn't impact their symptoms, just here's a script, sayonara, see you later. I've had other clients that have had partners with the herpes virus go in and ask for support, and then the doctors have said, oh no, there's no chance of transmission unless there's an outbreak, so don't even worry about it. And then they've ended up with the virus. They've spent thousands of dollars. In certain parts of the world, the sexual health industry will charge you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for tests, only for women to end up with the virus on the other side of it. So they're in a lot of emotional pain, deep shame, and so much resentment and anger towards the medical field.
Yep.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that whole spiel.
Yeah, definitely have to boil the kettle on this one. There's about 3 or 4 points you made. I'll probably forget some of them, but let me just start with anytime you're resenting something, you cannot judge and resent something on the outside that doesn't reflect some part of you on the inside. And that at first is a little bit like discomforting to hear. I know when I first heard it, it's like, fuck you, what are you talking about? I would never do that. Or I would, I pride myself on not doing that behavior. But anytime you're resenting something on the outside, based on the way I'm trained now and what I know to be true, is that you want to find out specifically what that person did or didn't do. Yeah. Because 10 people could receive the same news, but they might be judging something a little bit of like nuance and subtleties about what the medical doctor or the specialist, whatever, is actually doing. And it's to actually then go own it in yourself, that behavior. And so maybe it was like deceiving you, or maybe it was like giving false information. And it's like, and whenever you point the finger out, you got 3 pointing back. So you want to own the behavior. The second step to that, it's part of actually what's a bigger process called the DiMartini method, what I'm licensed and trained in, is to go find the benefits. Because I think that's part of probably what you, if I'm correct, how you turn, this is a bit of Preston Smiles coming through, your pain into power, your mess into message, right? Yeah. Is how is it serving you? Because for some people it catalyzes, again, self-responsibility. Because maybe they're brain offloading and giving their responsibility to the specialist. And maybe the biggest blessing right now is for you to wake up, and it's been the wake-up call you've needed. To take more accountability for your health, maybe take more, accountability for what's going on in your life. Maybe it's catalyzing something, awakening something, opening a certain door. What is it inspiring in you? What is it asking of you? And if you sit down and really sincerely, because if mental masturbate's not going to go anywhere, but sincerely sit down and ask, if you're resenting this and you're really frustrated, how is this serving me? So you're turning this, what seems to be in the way to on the way. And then you're not a victim of history or your circumstance, but you're rather, again, master of your life. And you're taking whatever happens and turning it into an advantage and turning it into something you can be grateful for. Because if I was asked you now, are you grateful for everything that's happened in your life specific to this and what it's given you in your life? I'm sure it's like, fuck yeah, right? It's opened up countless doors, giving you financial opportunities, business opportunities, career. You've, I'm sure, met countless people, had deep conversations, all these blessings and gifts that it's given you based on something initially that was very painful, right? So there are always 2 sides to an event. Every perception in life, in every single moment, births pairs of opposites. So if you're resenting something, it's because you're more conscious of the pain, more conscious of the negatives, more conscious of the downsides. You just have unconscious information sitting there in your subconscious mind waiting to be revealed. So if you ask that question, how is this serving me? How is it on the way? What is it revealing? How is it enriching my life? Those answers are there. You're just going to go look. That's the first part. I mean, we'll take it bit by bit. There was a second part to what you said. I knew I'd forget something. It was the anger, resentment, the emotional stuff. That is definitely part of it, because I think the second part to this is kind of the shame and the guilt associated, right? I mean, this is going to have to dovetail the conversation with the whole virus narrative, and we'll get to that in a second. But anytime you're feeling shame, you're assuming that you've done something either to yourself. If there's guilt involved, there's another person involved that's caused more pain than pleasure. More drawbacks than benefits, more disadvantage than advantage, more loss than gain. So it's kind of the same process done differently, is how is this serving me? If there's shame there, how is this serving me? And start to find all the blessings, because there's no crisis without blessing. They're entangled like yin and yang. So anytime you're minimizing yourself, you're going to feel shame. So the shame persona and the pride persona are the dysmorphic perceptions we have of ourselves. If we have shame, we tend to regret things. We think, oh, it's bad, it's wrong, or I've done bad. It's finding out why I did this or how whatever is happening to me is serving me. And that can lift a lot of the shame. The guilt is then another person. And at first you might say it's not serving them, and that's exactly why you're experiencing the guilt. But again, everything has 2 sides. There's no such thing as a one-sided event, a one-sided behavior, or it wouldn't exist. Because everything in this, according to universal principles and universal laws, we have the law of unity and the law of opposites, or law of polarity. So everything has 2 sides. So I would submit that if you're feeling shame, is to find out specifically what the shame is about, actually identify it, get specific, be objective. And because that's going to be self-directed, how is this serving me? And find out in any area of your life, whether it's spiritually, mentally, financially, vocationally, intimately, physically, any area of your life, how it's serving you, and lift that sense of shame, this false sense of shame, and that can help balance things out. You'd be amazed at how quickly you can dissolve shame and guilt.
What do you mean by lifting shame?
If you imagine a seesaw,
Yeah.
when you're experiencing shame, you're minimizing yourself because you're now conscious of more pain, you're more conscious of disadvantages, downsides, so you're minimizing yourself. I'm sure everyone's had that experience where they've kind of put someone on a pedestal, they've worshipped someone, celebrity worship, or they've really admired someone. The moment you do that, you simultaneously minimize yourself. I'm sure we've all had that experience, first date, highly infatuated with a guy or a girl, couldn't sleep at night, and you tend to inject their values, try to be like them to get close to them. We've all had that experience. So anytime you put someone up on a pedestal, up above equilibrium, think they're better than you, or they've got something I don't, or whatever experience, whatever perception you have, you automatically minimize yourself. And that minimization is a self-devaluing, self-esteem kind of shame persona. So it's not really you. The authentic you is the integration of pride and shame. Because the opposite is true. I'm sure we've all looked down on someone and said, I would never do that, and they're a piece of shit, or what a dumbass, or they're really ugly, and we look down on people. Well, the moment you put people in the shit pit, as I call it, you elevate yourself relative to them. So anytime you're looking above people or below people, you're not being yourself. You kind of skew your authentic self. Because the true intimacy comes where what I see in you, I have and I am. That's why it's into me, I see intimacy. So it's leveling the playing field, realizing that whatever you see in others, you have, whether it's up or down, resentment or infatuation, you have it. It's just unconscious. But again, coming back to this idea of shame when it comes to, say, herpes, it's assuming that there's something you've done or not done that's causing you to minimize yourself. So to lift that shame is to go find where the upsides, the blessings, you're balancing the seesaw out. It's going into your unconscious mind and finding what's the hidden information here, the other side of the equation, you might say, to balance that seesaw out. And that balances the mind out. And when the mind is balanced, you're going to feel more authentic. You're not going to feel prideful and exaggerated or shameful and minimized. Just authentic yourself.
How would you support a client who is resistant to finding the benefit? Who is very determined to say there's no benefit, this is here to ruin my life, this isn't...
Yeah, I would ask what benefit... Every human being, Psychology 101 is every human being makes decisions moment by moment based on what they perceive in their mind's eye will give them the greatest advantage over disadvantage. So I call it the unconscious motive. This happens with illness too, so you make up a very good point. Some people actually fight for their illness. They don't want to let it go. So I automatically know that in their conscious or unconscious mind, they're getting more benefits out of running the story or having that label. So if someone wants to run that story, maybe their unconscious motive is to stay mad at someone. Maybe it's to stay mad at the world. Maybe they're getting attention. Maybe they're getting sympathy. They're getting some sort of benefit. Otherwise, they won't be holding on to it. Because every human being makes decisions based on what they perceive will give them the greatest advantage over the disadvantage. So if they don't want to change because they're getting more advantages, I'm going to feel that resistance. And usually the question at that point is, what benefit are you getting out of it? Or what would it mean to you to let go of this story? And you're really trying to uncover those motives. You're trying to get to the problem under the problem under the problem. Because it's not surface level at that point.
So I'll give you some examples. I have clients that are either socialites or Z-grade celebrities and they feel like they have a social image to uphold, and or I have women that feel like they're very high up in leadership in some kind of company and or enterprise and believe that this piece about them, if it was to be discovered, that it would ruin their career and therefore their finances are going to go out the window. If I meet you and you're a part of the company, if I disclose to you, you're going to tell the rest of the company my career is about to be destroyed. So when I speak to them, they're saying, I want to break free, but there is actually no benefit because my career is on the line. And she believes that even when you say...
As in you're saying this leader has what she perceives to be herpes.
Yes.
But it's hidden. It's in the kind of in the closet.
Yes, that's the client that I find the most challenging to break through because her social identity is attached to the virus.
So if she has a high value on social influence and beauty and her image, then there's naturally no way she's going to give that up because again, in her mind's eye, mathematically, she's got more benefits from keeping it hidden.
Yes. So when she says to you, hold on, Mitch, what do you mean benefit? My life is being ruined right now. I'm dating unaligned men. I'm sleeping with people that don't respect me. I can never have a loving relationship because I'm constantly always lying. But if I do give this thing up, my whole life goes down the drain. I lose my career. I lose my financials. What are you telling me is the benefit that I'm holding on to?
I'd just come back to universal principles and say everything has two sides. I'd establish the need first. If this client's come to me, she's come to me for a reason.
Yes.
So obviously you have to establish a need. I would, the first time I meet any client or prospect is what's the need to be established. So we're very, very clear about what my intention and what my coaching and facilitation will do and not do. If their need is that I want to be able to share this publicly, but I'm afraid of doing it so far because of these reasons, then we'd go discover that. Because at that point, I can meet her halfway because you can only lead a horse to water. If her desire is to break free from that, and find the other side, then I'm going to fish it out of her. I mean, I'll get a sledgehammer and break it out, do whatever it needs to assist that. I do whatever I can to help people break through. And I know that I'm certain that every event and every experience you have in life is two-sided. If it didn't have two sides, it wouldn't exist.
Yes.
So it's just about asking the curious question and getting into the subconscious psyche, because it is there. I'm not trying to get people to make shit up or lie or brainwash them. The information's there. It's also going to be filtered through their value system. And that's, I mentioned values before.
Yes.
If they have a high value on something, they maybe have an internal conflict between what they think they want and what they actually truly want.
Yes.
For example, if you walk into a room with 100 people and you say, who wants to be financially independent? You can imagine every hand's going up.
Yeah.
And then you ask, now, who actually is financially independent? 99 hands go down.
Yes.
So people have a fantasy about what they actually want and what their life demonstrates. So this, again, is where a lot of the DiMartini method, universal principles, the application of values is where I come in when I facilitate. To find out what the unconscious motives are, what the person's values are, what their intention is, where they're looking to break through in terms of what glass ceilings that are kind of limiting from living life fully. Because if that is their true innate desire and they believe that becoming out public about this is going to benefit them, but they have a block on it, it's just about dissolving the block and finding out what's in the way there, and then getting them to see that there's more advantages to doing what they. If they do desire that, it's to help them see the other side of the equation. Because if they saw more advantages to actually coming out in public, just like you did to some degree, you wouldn't have come out in public if you didn't see more advantages. Might have been scary as shit at the first time.
It was scary as shit.
Scary as shit. But eventually you can see now there are more advantages to do it because you've seen how it served you, your life, the life of others, the influence, the impact, the service to humanity, your financial reward, career, like everything that you've perceived as giving you an advantage is why you came out about it, ultimately. So if someone's not at your stage yet, it's because there's still more advantages by keeping it hidden. It's pure, plain and simple. So if that is a true desire of theirs, again, you have to establish that need, because if it's not a desire, you're going to push it uphill. If it's a true desire, then we can work with that. If it's not, we're going to waste any time.
Well, for a lot of them, it's not even about coming out publicly. Some women have resentment around being like, it's easy for you because you're a coach. There's a reason for you to share it publicly. They just want to be able to share it with one person so they can have an intimate and loving relationship. But they still have a belief attached to it that the sharing of this information will not be between you and I. You're going to share it with Jade. Jade's going to share it with the rest of Perth. My entire career and life is ruined. My family hate me. No one will date me ever again. Life is over. And so for them, I know when the conversation around benefit comes up, they can't see the benefit in their holding.
So you're saying they won't share it with you, or they won't share it with an intimate lover?
An intimate lover.
Because that intimate lover may tell someone else.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what they're thinking about consciously or unconsciously in real time. And that's why they're not doing it.
Yes.
You can dissolve that. I'm absolutely certain if I got any one of your listeners who are in that position, give me 3 hours with them and I'll break that.
Yeah. His information is in the show notes, ladies.
If they desire it. I mean, again, I'm not going to force anyone to anything they don't want to do.
Yes.
If it's a true desire, there's a way to do it. If the why is big enough, the house take care of themselves. That's where I come in. So if their why, if it's a true yearning and a desire on their heart to share it with their intimate partner, but they're afraid, the fear is there, they've got a block. So we just clear the block. Anytime you're fearing the future, fear, to anyone listening, through your imagination or senses, anything in the future that you're perceiving more pain than pleasure, more drawback than benefit, more loss than gain, more drawback than benefit, whatever, you're going to have fear of it. And that's why you don't do it. That's why people say fear holds me back. So if you dissolve the fear and find out the unconscious side, the other side to balance the equation, the fear dissolves. Now, they may also have an entangled fantasy because they are really entangled. The fantasy might be, I want to be able to tell my intimate lover and then there be no risk. Well, that's an unrealistic expectation because you get on his bad side and he could tell someone. So then again, they're already calculating that, okay, if I'm with this guy, I might want to spend, tell him, and I want to tell him. But what happens if we break up in 3 years? And what happens if, he turns and then, so every woman and man are thinking about these repercussions because it's self-preservation. They're looking after their best interests. They're looking after all areas of their life and they don't want to jeopardize that. So there's a natural inclination to survive and there's a natural inclination to discern about what you do and don't say to someone.
Yes.
But again, if it's a true desire, you'd want to actually dissolve every angle of what they're fearing because the fear might not be telling the partner. Again, they may be fine with that. It's what happens if I break up with him and then he turns nasty and then he tells the world. That's the fear. It's not telling him. It's the other thing. So we'd have to go through systematically each fear because you cannot fear the unknown. That's something I want to be very, very clear on. You cannot fear the unknown. You can only have fear of the content of your mind.
Tell us more about that.
People say, I fear the unknown. That's not true. You can't have an emotion without mental content. You can only have fear of the content of your mind. So that's, again, what we would find out if it's pertaining specifically to this case. If they say, I have no fear of telling my intimate partner, and that's like, okay, well, what do you have fear over? I'm afraid of him telling his mother, or I'm afraid of him telling a friend, I'm afraid of it getting out on social media, I'm afraid of it getting onto an article, or I don't know how big they are, tabloid or something, depending on how big they are. So it's just finding out that, because there'll be content in their mind. again, if it's a true desire of theirs, then there'll be a way to dissolve that. If it's not a desire of theirs, I can appreciate that. And, there are things that we are discerning about what we do and don't say. We'll get into the virus topic in a second.
Yeah.
But, it's funny because, okay, I'm just going to go out and say it. You can't give herpes to someone.
Okay, you got to tell us more. This is the bit where I'm like, okay, Mitch is going to land one on us. What do you mean when you say you can't give herpes to someone?
Look, I've just opened up a can of worms. I'm going to just say two things first.
I'm going to let the podcast team know that we've got a 9-hour podcast ahead of us.
All right. I realize that by me opening this can of worms, there'll be a lot of reactions as to you listeners listening. So I just want to start with a few foundational things before I enter first.
Yes.
First of all, this is not my work, so don't shoot the messenger. I'm passing on what I've relentlessly spent thousands of hours divulging, but I'm certainly by no means the expert. I'm relaying information from the expert. So that's number one. Don't shoot the messenger, please. Just doing God's work. I want to start with an analogy. When you want to understand something and it's beyond the human naked eye, you might have a hypothesis about something and how something works. Like we're here on this planet to find out how things work, right? And all of this eventually, by the way, is going to come back to the virus narrative. When you want to understand something and you want to test for something, you have a hypothesis, right? Then you need to go test that to ensure that you have validation of the claim. Let's just digress for a second and assume you're a pirate on a ship with 40 other pirates, right? And you're on a voyage for 3 months. And one day someone starts coughing and gets all these symptoms of sickness and illness. One person. The following day, 3 people will get the same symptoms. 2 days later, 4 more people get it. 3 days later, 7 more people get it. And then by the end of 2 weeks, the whole ship has the same set of symptoms. It's easy to think with the naked eye that that first person gave someone, or really everyone on the ship, this sickness, right? This idea of contagion, which is also a bunch of shit, which if we have time, we'll go over as well. Because viruses and contagion, yes, they are kind of the same thing. They do overlap, but there are differentiations. So that's what we call an epidemiological observation. One person started with a set of symptoms, and then by the end of 2 weeks, every single person every part on that ship had the same symptoms. So the epidemiological observation is one person gave sickness to the entire crew. That's a very logical way of looking at it. Except when they get offshore and they find fruit and they all eat a piece of fruit, all their symptoms go away because it was actually scurvy and they all had vitamin C deficiency. So there wasn't one bit of contagion on that ship, but it appeared to be that way. So if we now take this to the herpes topic or any viral contagion, story, we might call it, it's easy to think that, I have an outbreak or not. Like you said, I didn't have an outbreak. I did have an outbreak. I had an outbreak, didn't give it to someone. Didn't have an outbreak, did give it to someone. So it's easy to think that if I had a blister on my vagina or my cock, and then 2 weeks later someone else has it, it's easy to think through epidemiology and an observation that I gave that person that thing. If you go through the medical literature, that is not how it works. There is no medical literature study published that shows that herpes virus, one, even exists. We'll get into that in a second, or any virus for that matter. That's a big claim. Let alone can you give it to someone. For any of your listeners, if you want to just skip out on trusting my word, and again, don't believe anything I have to say, there's a beautiful doctor, Dr. Samantha Bailey. You can go to her website and she has a beautiful, I think it's a 15-minute video that just goes perfectly, so succinctly. The 15 minutes will change your life about the history of herpes, how it started, how it came to be, that they so-called established and found the virus, and how they did so-called contagion studies. You'd probably finish the 15 minutes not only shocked, but probably laughing at how retarded the actual science, quote unquote, that they did to show, one, herpes exists, and two, is contagious. There's also some other great resources. One is Genital Herpes, A Cruel Hoax by Herbert Shelton. Great book. Again, your listeners want to find out again about the history of herpes. That goes into a deeper, more than a 15-minute video, a deeper dive into the history of herpes, how it came to be, the falsifying of data, blah, 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 blah. That alone is a very empowering, those two resources. Because again, we're kind of digressing, but I'm going to try and keep it as relevant as possible, is that how much shame, anger, guilt, resentment, how much of these emotional charges, which are all based on perception. So again, if you believe herpes exists and you believe that someone gave it to you or you give it to someone, of course there's emotional perturbations going to come through. What I'm trying to do in life is arm people with as much information, knowledge, and wisdom as that it's going to help empower them, which can help also then start to dissolve some of those emotions and help them feel like maybe they're more sexually free. Because I've worked with people with quote unquote herpes, and then I take them through health protocols or detoxification protocols and regeneration protocols and emotional dissolving and collapsing protocols, and their herpes just seemingly disappears. So this idea that it stays dormant, and it's just all a bunch of shit. And I just don't have time to go through that, obviously, now. But I know many physicians, and I'm not just me, because I'm a holistic coach, what would I know? Many physicians who do the same thing, who are medically trained, So it's not like they're quacks or they're right-wing nut jobs. These are medical doctors who were trained in virology. One in particular was trained by Professor Baltimore, who was probably known as the godfather of virology and viruses. And he too, so he was traditionally trained, and he too takes many, many people who have so-called herpes, these viral diseases, puts them on health protocols. That doesn't get all of them because, there's so many subjective variables, but many, many people who have quote-unquote symptoms, flare-ups, blisters, breakouts, 90 to 100% gone with just changing up their diet, going through some fasting, detoxification protocols, using certain binders, all kinds of demulcents, anti-inflammatories, certain things to specifically either clean out the body, regenerate, maybe there's nutrient deficiencies to assess, or again, there's emotional perturbations to be addressed. Anytime you can balance the body, clean the body's terrain or the internal environment, and bring health and wellness, bring your wellness quotient up, you're going to give your body the greatest chance of overcoming whatever this thing is. I have speculation, I have confidence, and I have my own hypothesis, but I too believed in the whole herpes virus, the whole the virus narrative in general, until COVID hit. It was actually 2020. And I thought, fuck, some guy eating a bat soup, shutting the world down, that seems a bit odd, doesn't it?
Very.
And that then started the whole rabbit hole. And I just started going through paper after paper after paper. I got on the phone with doctors and physicians. I did Zoom interviews, and then I started to join groups. And and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So just know that prior to this, I was taking traditional virology courses, believed in vaccines, I believed in all this stuff. So it's not like I've come from this side either. I came from the traditional, what's traditionally known. And it seems very contrarian out there to say viruses don't exist and this guy's a nut job and it's just so fucking wild. What a dumb thing to say. I get it. I absolutely get it until you cannot see what you've seen. And when you actually, I have no stake in the outcome back. That's the thing too. I have nothing to sell. I have no antiviral detox protocols. I have nothing to sell here. So I have no dog in the fight. I don't care if these particles exist or not. I just want to know the truth. That was part of, when we first had this conversation about wanting to understand how the world works, how this universe works, and what is true. And I know for a lot of your listeners and many people out there, they're suffering because of this viral narrative.
Yes. Suffering in
immense ways. And it's just
ruining their lives, and it's heartbreaking.
So unnecessary, and it's heartbreaking. So that's why, because I want to equip people. And again, part of my job of self-mastery is to empower people, both with the theoretical knowledge and then the application of the knowledge too. Again, there's so much more I could say. I would say the best resources you could go to if herpes specific. Again, Dr. Sam Bailey's website, Samantha Bailey. You can put that in the resources if you want me to give it to you. There's another guy by the name of Mike Stone. He has a website called Virology, so the lies of virology. And then you have Dr. Mark Bailey, who's Samantha Bailey's husband, who wrote a beautiful piece about farewell to virology, because it's the only subdiscipline of microbiology that is based on pseudoscience. There was an experiment in 1954 by Dr. John Enders. He was a virologist. He was doing work with measles virus. And he did the proper controls, because when you go down this rabbit hole, you realize that the way they do science in every microbiology study, they do it really, really well. They use the scientific method. It changed in 1954 with the word of isolation. How do you isolate a virus? How do you come to know its existence? How do you know this thing exists? How do you know it's a physical particle in the physical world? You need to isolate it from its environment, right? To find out, to study it, characterize it, do those kinds of things. So that was done in 1954 properly with controls, this guy, John Enders. And when he worked with the measles viruses, when he had his controls done, he, at the end of the study, said, we have no idea what measles is and if it exists or not, because the control experiments without the quote-unquote so-called virus looks exactly the same. This gets into the whole conversation about cell culture, the way that they, so-called isolate and purify viruses, the way that they characterize them. It's all based on unicorn fairy dust. So as weird as that sounds to say. And again, that's not coming from me. That's coming from very, very highly trained physicians. And even the traditional virologists will agree that there are over 100,000 papers of isolation in the medical literature. Not one of them, and I mean not one of them, confirmed by the CDC, the NIH, and the Doherty Institute, 3 largest institutes in the world in terms of medicine and virology. Every single one of them actually agrees. Not one study exists where they've taken any fluid, so that's blood, urine, spit, semen, any fluid of the human body, and isolated a virus directly from that fluid.
Wow.
Doesn't exist.
So, with all of that information.
I know that was a lot.
It's a lot.
And we're just getting started, but we can't go into everything today.
If a woman is listening right now and she's like, right, I was dating a man who was told if herpes doesn't exist, he told me that he has it and he carries it orally. He was going down on me. There was no outbreak present. 3 weeks later, I have an outbreak and now I'm getting them every 6 to 8 weeks. I'm miserably depressed. I hate my life. What are you telling me that is happening right now? Because prior to meeting him and him telling me this, that experience was not happening. So if herpes doesn't exist and I can't get it, you can't give someone herpes, what the fuck is happening?
So you just repeat that. So the guy didn't have an outbreak?
He didn't have an outbreak.
But he told her that he did have it?
He either told her or they'd done sexual health tests prior to show their panels, and he said HSV2 orally detected.
Oh, detect positive.
Positive.
Yep.
And so now in some stage throughout their relationship, she's now showing symptoms. So she's listening to this and saying, this
guy's full of shit.
What the fuck? Because my experience is I didn't have something on my pussy ever. This guy ends up with this panel, finds out that he has it, tells me that he's never had a symptom ever, and now genitally I've got cold sores on my pussy. What do you?
That's what I was trying to find out the nuance of the situation.
Yeah.
Look, I can speculate, and the first thing I want to say is that first of all, absence of evidence is an evidence of absence. And the onus is on the person to disprove something that hasn't been proven. So if the virus hasn't been shown to exist, the onus isn't on me to disprove something that doesn't shown to exist. That's just kind of under a scientific level. What I would submit is that this gets into the whole conversation of terrain theory and the internal terrain of the body, detoxification, the expression of symptoms, psychosomatics. There's so many other variables that I could speculate, because by no means I'm going to say this is the evidence and I'm right and blah, blah, blah. We're all learning. I'm just saying that the way that the narrative is being told, that's all I'm saying. The way that the narrative is being told, that there's this microscopic pathogenic priming particle that's replicant competent, that you can transmit from one person to another. They've tried to show it in studies. Like, they haven't not tried. There are plenty of well-paid scientific labs that have tried to do this. They just haven't been able to recreate it. So you have to ask the question then, if tightly controlled variables and tightly controlled experiments to try and show contagion have shown to fail, then we need to look for elsewhere. We need to look at other ways of how this is manifested. So again, by no means am I saying that herpes doesn't exist in terms of all of your listeners, that I'm gaslighting them and their symptoms don't exist. Your experience is exactly the same. Your symptoms are exactly the same. I'm not denying that. And it'd be ludicrous for me to say. What I'm saying is that the way that the narrative has been told isn't true. It doesn't hold any weight. What I would submit then is you start into the conversation of, one, when most people have sex, they're talking about high friction areas. I'm sure you've had plenty of rough sex, and so have I. I'm plenty of wild sex.
No, not me.
I'm a perfect princess.
Just you over here.
So I would submit is really get sincere about how, how much friction, how much heat goes on during some pretty wild sex. I'm sure everyone of your listeners, especially if they listen to you, they're probably pretty raw.
Hey, we're wild over here. No vanilla in this.
Look, we're human beings, right? We're sexual creatures and we like to get fucking freaky and wild. So if I'm looking through that lens, this is just one lens of many, you could look at the way that, just anyone get some sandpaper and just rub it on your hand and look what happens. You'll get redness. You can get blisters to develop, which is kind of a combination of proteinaceous fluid and some lipids and things like this nature that come up as blisters. So you could actually create the exact same things on your forearm through friction that you can on your penis and vagina. So there could be a friction element. I like to also think that if I'm looking at the body as a machine and I'm looking at the vascular system where the blood flow is, and also the lymphatic system, which is a kind of sewage system of the human body, there's a lot of heat at your genitals because of the way that your body's made up, because you've got underwear or pants, you've got heat, and you got your legs, together. There's a lot of heat there, which means vasodilation, the opening of the vascular wall, and the widening of tissue, the widening of arteries in the capillary bed. And then if you're looking at then the skin with kind of the 6, 7, 8 layers of dermis, when you start to create friction, you're creating almost openings that becomes more porous, and you give room, because your skin's a third kidney, it's kind of the largest eliminative organ of the human body, you can get an excretion of waste. In the same way you have excretion of waste on your face, it's called acne, or the excretion of waste anywhere in your skin. Anytime your body can get rid of something, it's going to manifest as some sort of expulsion of matter. And your genitals become a place when you add friction and heat, rubbing, you might say, this idea of friction, and then agitating the penis or the vagina. You can get a translocation of toxins, you get a translocation of cellular debris. Again, this is speculation, but this is kind of my best guess. And again, I'm not saying I'm right and I have an alternative theory. I'm just, again, my big stance right now is that the theory that's being told to people just doesn't hold its weight up in the medical literature. So that's one big thing that I think is something to consider, because again, you have a lot of blood flow down in your visceral trunk, down near your organs, down near your genitals. There's a lot of blood flow. And again, there's a high activity of, when you're sexually active, there's a high level of friction. So someone could be, again, I'm sure someone has had the experience where they've developed blisters on their penis or vagina, and both partners weren't quote unquote HSV1, HSV2 positive. I'm sure people have had outbreaks quote unquote on their mouth and they've still come up HSV negative. So if it's so prevalent and they're able to find this virus and they've got symptoms but they're negative to the virus, quote unquote, one, how does that work? Two, I'm sure there are people out there that have had people with active outbreaks that didn't get the symptoms. So if it's so highly contagious and transmissible, how is it that they're not getting these symptoms? So you have to start asking all these questions and kind of broaden the perspective. And that was what really started to, happen for me too, was this very cynical view of, viruses and how they work, and they're, the pathogenic priming particles, and they're transmissible. But then again, you just look at the literature and you look at the studies that have done to prove transmission, and it just all falls like a house of cards. There's no weight. So I hope that answers the question, like in terms of a practical example. I don't have all the answers. There are other, could be psychosomatic factors. Sometimes there's a nocebo effect. I'll actually give you a study to kind of explain this moot point. Well, it's not really a moot point. It's actually quite a powerful point. We all know the placebo and the nocebo effect. I take a sugar pill, I tell you it's a drug, it has this effect, you have that effect. What the hell is going on there? There's been huge allergy studies where there've been like a 90% reduction of symptoms with a sugar pill. So what's going on there? They've done antidepressant studies where they've had as good, if not better, results with sugar pills than the actual antidepressant. What's going on there? And there was a recent study with people that were highly gluten intolerant and celiac, and they brought them into a gluten-free, gluten control building. So I don't know how they did it, but there was not one molecule of gluten allowed in the building. And they sat these celiacs and highly gluten intolerant people down and said, we're going to give you a small amount of gluten in these meals to see how you respond. So we can do subjective, how they feel, how their responses are, and objective, histamine markers, cytokine markers, inflammatory markers, etc. We're going to get some data out of you. Anyway, these people start eating the meals, and within minutes, rashes, hives, fever, itching, diarrhea, vomiting. And then they were told that there was no gluten in the meals, and then all the symptoms went away. So they manifested the symptoms with no gluten in their meals, and then also their symptoms went away the moment that they then realized and they were told there's no gluten in their meals. So even just the power of the mind, and we talk about psychosomatics and the manifestation of symptoms based on your belief. So it may also be, I get you with your journey. Let's say you were this person. Look at what you've created in your life based on this experience of you believing that you had herpes, right? Look at what you've created, the amount of impact, the influence, the support, the uplifting of humanity, your own financial income and rewards, and your business career and growth. Maybe you needed to experience that, whether it's some virus or not, to catalyze and catapult you on your journey. So maybe there was some divine intervention of you actually to receive that and go through that experience to ultimately catalyze you into your mission in life. I don't know. Again, I don't have all the answers. I'm just saying that when I've gone through literature and people way smarter than me have gone through the literature, the evidence doesn't weigh up.
Yes.
There's even a guy last year, because this goes into every virus, SARS-CoV-2, HIV, the whole AIDS scandal. There's another kind of godfather of virology known as Luc Montagnier. He passed away recently. But he was known, him and Professor Bolton were kind of known as the two most forefront authorities on virology. Luc Montagnier's electron microscopists, they view viruses statically through electron microscopes, which are highly powered microscopes. When the Perth group, there was actually people from Perth, believe it or not, who took a lot of people to court, even up to the High Court of Australia, over the whole HIV/AIDS scandal. And he was in question, just Dr. Charles Duguid, who was the electron microscopist for Luc Montagnier for 20 years. Like imagine that, for 2 decades working for someone looking at their work. And he was quoted to say, and I quote, "We never saw HIV. All we saw was dead cellular debris in petri dishes. We never once saw HIV." So that's the own words from Dr. Charles Duguid. You can look this up, from Luc Montagnier's work on HIV and AIDS. He said it was a bunch of shit. We never saw it.
Wow.
And this is for every single virus, even the SARS-CoV-2 papers. There's now over, I think, 20 or 30,000 papers saying the viral isolation of SARS-CoV-2. Go to the methods section. It's all done in petri dishes with no controlled variables. The NIH, the CDC, the Doherty Institute, and over, I think now 40 Commonwealth governments have been asked, do you have a single paper showing any isolation of SARS-CoV-2 directly from a human bodily sample? Every reply? No.
So with your extent and capacity of research and resources and basically seeing who is full of shit in the world, what makes Demartini's work so brilliant for you to be trained, skilled and qualified?
Sure. Just so we know, Demartini believes in viruses.
Okay.
I actually challenged him over about 28 emails back and forth. And actually, by the end of it, all it showed me was he's actually not capable of understanding what I was presenting to him. We had a great banter back and forth.
Okay.
But he's a brilliant mentor. I mean, he's just had a profound influence on my life.
Yes.
I love the man. I'm seeing him next week in Sydney and doing the breakthrough experience. This comes back to when I was a kid, and we spoke about, this idea of I just kept asking questions. So much so, teachers at school rang my mum and say, "Mitchell's disturbing the class." And she would say,
"He's too smart for us."
Well, no, they'd say, she'd go, "What's he doing?" And they'd say, usually, "He's asking questions." And so my mum would go, "So?" "He's at school to learn."
Yeah.
And she really had my back. So love you, mum. Shout out to you. And it comes back to that insatiable hunger. And then I was going through life going, this person's saying this and Tony Robbins saying that and this person's saying this and this is contradicting this. And it was a lot of organized chaos. Yes. Going, hold on, why is this person saying this and this person saying that? And a lot of inconsistencies across the board, especially in different areas of life. Even with the same teacher, they'd teach one thing in one area of life, but then it would contradict something else. So I wanted to know, what the law of laws were, how things fit together like a jigsaw puzzle piece. So it made sense, because ultimately people don't give a fuck how things work. It's ultimately, does this make sense? And that's what I want your viewers and listeners to understand, is like, that's the only real question to ask yourself. Even though, yes, we can fool ourselves, I'm definitely admitted of that, is, does this make sense and is it useful? When I found the DeMartini Institute and the work of Dr. John DeMartini, that was profound because I remember the first breakthrough experience I did, which is kind of signature program, 2-day, 26-hour intensive. I had like anxiety on the couch for like 3 hours. I just couldn't shake this anxiety. My whole paradigm was just shattered. And you realize most of the world are living in hallucinatory states. They're driven by the amygdala, which is the subcortical region of the brain. It's more of where our animal nature is, where we have the desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Seek ease, avoid difficulty. Seek support, avoid challenge. So that's our animal nature. Our angelic nature embraces both. And that's where the most advanced part of the brain is, which is the medial prefrontal cortex. It's also where the heart and brain synchronize up. So you have heart and brain coherence is the forebrain. And that's where we embrace pain and pleasure in the pursuit of something inspiring and meaningful. It's where we embrace support and challenge equally in the pursuit of growth. Because maximum growth and function in life occur when you embrace pain and pleasure equally, support and challenge equally. Like imagine growing up as a child and getting praise. Oh my God, Beck, you're amazing. You're so positive. You're so one-sided. Good on Beck. And you never got challenged. You never got criticized. You never got rejected. How the hell are you going to build resilience and adaptability and introspection and foresight and, feedback? So you need both. And when I found the Institute, it was this whole paradigm shattering of realizing that most people are chasing fantasies. They're chasing this one-sided life. People say, what's the biggest thing killing people right now? Obesity, cancer and all that. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Sure, the data's pretty clear. I would submit in the personal development world, the biggest thing killing people is the positive thinking movement. Because it's absolutely futile. You need negative thinking. You need both sides. Every ology in science has it. If you just look around the universe, you have a sun and a moon, a day and a night, a good and a bad, a right and a wrong, a male, female.
Left and right,
inwards, outwards, up and down. Like everything comes in terms of these laws of unity and laws of opposites. They come as entangled pairs, yin and yang. So that shattered. That's probably why I had anxiety for 3 hours, because most of my life I was striving for that which is unattainable, which is a one-sided life. I was trying to be a one-sided person, being a kind person and a nice person and a positive person, and only being then smashed with the other side and suffering because of it. So I come on this podcast and say, I'm not a nice person. I'm not a mean person. I'm a human being, and I've got both sides. Sometimes when you support me, I'm really nice. Sometimes when you challenge me, I can be more mean. Depends on your perception of how I'm either supported or challenged, or either how I support or challenge you. And when people embrace both sides, they're relieved of the pressure of trying to be one-sided. And usually then because you don't see the world as it is, but as you are. So if you expect yourself to be one-sided, guess what else you're going to be doing? Expecting the world to be one-sided. Peace, no war. Kind, never cruel. Nice, never mean. Positive, never negative. And then you're let down by the expectation because you have this fantasy of being one-sided. And so, entering this world really shattered a lot of those myths. It gave me full permission to be myself, which is a two-sided individual, as we all are. There's no such thing as a one-sided individual. The striving for me to be positive, the striving to me to be kind, the striving for me to be nice was only driving the opposite in me. And I had a lot of that repressed because I was taught as a young kid. I mean, a lot of our programs are instilled in childhood. You would have mum or grandma or someone say, be nice now, don't be mean. And then she'd fucking yell at dad or grandpa 5 minutes later. And it's like, man, you hypocrite. What an unfulfilling and unachievable moral injunction. Like, be nice, don't be mean. Like, someone's abusing you, you're just going to criticizing, yelling at you, you're just going to be, oh yeah, I'm just going to be nice to about it. Like, no, man, you got to have a backbone and fucking stand up for yourself and be a bit mean and tell someone to fuck off. You need both sides. If you look at your psychology, your physiology, you have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. You have mitosis, which is cell division and growth, and apoptosis, cell death, basically. So I build and destroy, birth and death. So everything in your psychology, everything in your physiology is two-sided. Everything about human behavior is two-sided. So any attempts to be one-sided is what is driving a lot of people's depression, anxieties, bipolar splits, manic depressive episodes, schizophrenia. A lot of this can be attributed to the one-sided striving individual that then they get smacked the other side. So that's the start of it. The other part of the Institute was also recognizing the huge influence that the application of values have in people's lives. Because every decision, as I was saying before, every decision every single human being on this planet makes is based on what they perceive will give them the greatest advantage over disadvantage to their set of values. Every human being on this planet has a set of values. I have them, you have them, every listener has them. And that's the only thing people are dedicated and loyal to as well. So when people say, oh, he's not a loyal person or he cheated on me, we can break that down because people aren't loyal to you, even in intimate relationships. I'm not loyal to Jade. She's not loyal to me. We're loyal to our own values and we're dedicated to the fulfillment of each other's values. But she's not loyal to me and I'm not loyal to her. And so having the fantasy that this person, I've got a ring on the finger now, you're loyal to me and you're committed to me, that's usually when people get let down. In fact, actually, when someone cheats on someone, quote unquote, because we have to break that down, the subcomponents of cheating, Usually the first question I have for that person is, what did you do for them to cheat?
I've heard this through martinis because I think I saw you write this online, that if you're not willing to fulfill something, a need that your partner brings to you, expect it to be outsourced.
Delegated, yeah.
Yeah,
fully.
delegated.
Yeah, fully. So I know it's going to be triggering, but look, it's reality, because most people, again, are torturing themselves with the expectations of how they want life to be versus how life actually is.
Yes.
I'm interested in how life actually works. I have no, again, stake. I mean, I have a personal stake in the outcome, but I'd rather align myself with divine will than try and universal, like God's laws, you might say, or universe's laws, than my own sense of laws. Because at the end of the day, human laws are designed to be broken. Universal laws, you cannot. Mm-hmm. Stealing's wrong, people still steal. Mm-hmm. Murder's wrong, people still murder. Mm-hmm. Rape's wrong, people still rape. So I'm not here to judge things right or wrong. I'm here to understand why they're here on the planet and what function they serve, because if they didn't have a function, it wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. So you take a lot of the moral injunctions, a lot of the right-wrong language, that's a huge, paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. The application of values, as I just mentioned, so that way when you're looking at fulfilling your own life, you're really looking at what your life demonstrates. Because people have a fantasy of, they say, I should be doing this, I need to be doing this, I'm supposed to be doing that. That's all disempowering imperative language. Mm-hmm. Anytime, and this is again for your listeners out there, anytime you hear yourself saying, I have to, I've got to, I should be doing, I must do, I need to be doing, that's not you speaking. That's an injected value of some outer authority that you've subordinated to. Now, the same is true when you become self-righteous and you project your values. You'll say, you should be doing this. You're supposed to be doing this. You need to do this. And so you become self-righteous and project. And one is a kind of self-wrongous, if that's a word, or shameful persona, and you inject. But authenticity is that I like to, I want to, I choose to, I love to. When you hear yourself saying that I love to do this thing, like to all your listeners, if you're really looking for your purpose, it's an expression of your highest values. So find the things that you're saying where I love to do it, I want to do it. There's a spontaneous, inspired action within you that no one has to remind you about. I don't have to ring you up every day and go, Beck, I need you to do your coaching. I need you to do your things that are high values, because you're incentivized internally. You don't need motivation from the outside. You're internally driven from the inside. So the same is true for everyone, because there's shit that you think, oh, I got to do that. I say it all the time. And then I go, oh, that's not me. All that language is showing you that it's not important. Yeah. And if you start to really align your life to your values and congruent to your values, you're going to have a more fulfilling and inspiring life, because you're not expecting yourself to be someone you're not. And it reminds me of Einstein's quote when he said, if you're a cat expecting to swim like a fish, you're going to beat yourself up, have low self-worth, and want to change and fix yourself. Yeah. And paradoxically, if you're the fish expecting yourself to climb a tree like a cat, you're going to beat yourself up, think there's something wrong with you, and want to change and fix yourself. Yes. So anytime you want to change and fix yourself, it's usually because you've injected the values of someone else that you think you should be like. And if I was like that, my life would be better. And if I was like them, my life would be better. And that's just not true. Yeah. Because the magnificence of who you are is far greater than, and this comes directly from John, far greater than any fantasy you'll impose upon yourself. Who you are is fundamentally an expression of the universe. I know it's a bit hippy-dippy, but it's true. And, one of my expressions that I've found no one actually to say on the internet, so I'm kind of copyright, I'm owning this one, is that you're not a human in the universe, you're the universe in a human, expressed. So knowing your values, it's like the Delphi Oracle's message when she said, know thyself, be thyself, love thyself. Knowing thyself is knowing your set of values, your hierarchy of values, most important to least important. Being yourself is then taking actions congruent like that, like a train on a train track. The straighter it is, the smoother it goes. And then loving yourself is really the byproduct. Because like how many people out there, myself included, I've seen this part where it's so easy to say, I love you, or the love. But when it comes to looking yourself in the mirror, can you really deeply love yourself? It's like, ooh, nah, fuck no. And it's like, what's up with that? So my thing is, it's wise to want to be number one at you, not number two at someone else. And to really own who you are, and owning who you are, and where the power and authenticity and strength and magnetism and all those things are, come from you embodying this vessel and really coming to know what your values are, and then living in integrity with those values. Yeah. So this kind of like all encompasses the idea of moving into the DiMartini Institute, because the application of values, aligning your life with universal principles and thinking, I'm not going to outsmart God, I may as well get with like the show and like what's really going on in the universe, because then, your human will match divine will. And then again, all the other things that come from that is just like communication, because then you know how to communicate what you want in terms of what the other person wants. If you know what the other person wants and what their values are, you can communicate what you want in terms of what they want. Now you have equanimity or an equity, an equal fair exchange. And people, when they want to do business with you, they want to communicate with you, they respect you, they feel heard, seen, loved, and appreciated. Because if you think your values are more important, you'll talk down to them narcissistically. If you think their values are more important, you'd look up to them kind of altruistically. So when you're trying to get something for nothing and then the other trying to give something for nothing, both of those don't sustain you. Sustainability comes from loving them as much as you love yourself, wanting them to win as much as you want to win. Now you have fair exchange. So all these things, I mean, there's so much more, but like they're kind of the base points of what the Institute did for me, why then everything kind of clicked, and it was like, okay, there's so much consistency here now. It makes sense. Like, again, that was a thing. I was fighting a lot of my preconditioned beliefs and fantasies and hallucinations. Oh yeah, but I was like, ultimately, I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah.
I can't deny that this makes sense. Despite the fact it's going past 32 years of conditioning, it just fucking makes sense.
Yes.
And there's like such a deep, visceral, fuck yes. Oh, and like what a relief. Because now you're freed from, again, a lot of those hallucinations and fantasies and delusions that so many people, I know this only because I've seen it myself, live with and are striving for. And then again, beat themselves up and have all the negativity and the self-sabotage behavior and blah, blah, blah that they call it. But all of that is a feedback to get you back to be authenticity, in equitable exchange with everyone else on this planet, and authentic with your values.
Love. So to wrap this up, because I know that you felt really called to have women be able to walk away with a really tangible tool for them to integrate everything that they've received from this episode. If they're listening and maybe the herpes journey is resonating with them, maybe it's a different vehicle that they're navigating and they're wanting to take steps towards self-mastery, what is one thing that you could say that she could start to implement that would have her feeling like she's walking powerful steps forward in her life?
Yeah. You can never not fulfill your own values. It just depends how efficient and effective you are at doing it. So I would get really sincere about introspecting and reflecting about what you're really here to do on this planet. Like, why did you come to planet Earth? Why are you breathing right now? Why are you in the body that you're in with the mind that you were gifted and every one of the tools and resources that you were gifted to make a difference in the world and uplift humanity? Get really, really clear on that, because you can take all the multivitamins, spirulina, and do all your fucking affirmations all you want. But if you're not clear about what you're dedicated to, you can't live an inspiring life. And that's where the Jesus juice is at, is knowing your values, and your life demonstrates it. People go, what's my purpose? Your purpose is an expression of your highest values, and your values are demonstrated. Just put a drone above your head. Let it follow you for a month. That is the number one key thing, because if you don't know your values, you don't know yourself. If you're in an intimate relationship and you don't know the values of your partner, you don't know your partner, because you might be unconsciously projecting your own stuff onto them and not realizing what they're dedicated to. I know that if I want to have an intimate, fulfilling relationship with Jade, I'm going to speak to her in terms of what she wants based on what I want. And that brings us closer anytime. And this, I'm just going to bring the intimate relationship part to this as well, because, we all desire, the fulfilling relationship to some degree. Is anytime you can link two values together and find out whatever that person in your relationship is dedicated to is helping you fulfill what you're dedicated to. Anytime you can link two values, you bring the intimacy closer together. Because now, instead of going, oh, this person's this and they're that and they're this, or they're a weight, or oh, fuck, this pisses me off, you're actually seeing how they're fulfilling your mission here in life, your purpose here on earth. So I'd leave it with that. I'd say get really, really clear about what your life demonstrates, not what you wish it to be. Because you may already, this is the big one, many women, especially, even men, but many women that I know that I work with, because I do work with a lot of women, they're already living out their values, because you can't not, like I just said, but they're comparing it to someone else's. Their highest value might be children, but then they're looking at someone who's a CEO and thinking, oh, I should have a business. And they're not honoring the fact that they're actually the highest values to raise beautiful children. And don't just think you're impacting one person. Think about how many thousands, if not millions of people that one human being is going to interact with. So you're making a huge dedication and difference in the world. And so just knowing your values and then honoring your values, not being the cat and then expecting yourself to swim like a fish, because you're going to go through life torturing yourself. So I would leave you with that. Know your values, live by your values, honor the magnificence of who you are and the magnificence of other people, and you'll have a far more equanimous and equitable exchange with people and with life itself. Punchline to finish will be, we don't see the world as it is, but as we are. And you love yourself to the degree that you can make everyone and everything you.
Mic drop. I think we should all listen to this twice.
I thought I was just getting started.
I know you are. I'm like, podcasting, you're going to kill me. Mitch Vickridge, you're absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your incredible mind, your curiosity, every question that you've ever asked as a child, every teacher that ever called your mother. Thank you, Mum, for standing up for him and be like, isn't that what school's for? If any woman in my world would love to make their way into yours, where do we find you?
Yeah, so my website's under construction at the moment, Nirvana Health, but you can find I'm on Instagram, just hashtag at symbol, whatever, IG handle, Mitchell Vickridge. I'm sure you put it in the show notes. That's actually the best way to communicate with me. And then from there, we can usually take it to WhatsApp and then just email. We can do it that way.
Yeah, we'll put all your details and all your resources in the show notes below so everyone can go for a deep dive and see what they can no longer unsee.
Thank you guys for listening, and thank you for having me on this podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks for rocking our world.
Thank you.